Virgil was an ancient Roman poet of the Augustan period. He wrote the epic Aeneid. Virgil is one of Rome's greatest poets. The Aeneid is considered a classic and was so from the time it was written. It follows the events of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey and links this era to the creation of the city of Rome. As the Western Roman Empire was collapsing, Latin literature was kept for posterity by Cassiodorus and Bertius, and it was in this way the works of Plato and Aristotle were saved for future generations. Art was important at the court of Theodoric the Great in Ravenna. The courts were frequented by notable literary figures. To learn more about Italian and Sicilian literature, consider subscribing. While Paris became the focus of theological studies, Italian students of Roman law remained in Italy, and early universities were opened in Bologna, Padova, Vicenza, Modena, Naples, Salerno, and Parma. It was from here in northern Italy that literary progress would evolve. A nostalgic view of the glories of classical Rome was prevalent, and there was a keen interest in politics which would endure in future generations. The early Italian literary tradition of Occitan originated in northwest Italy. Lyrical poetry spread from France into Italy in the 12th century. The original Occitan lyric poets were brought to Lombardy from abroad by the Italian aristocracy. Gradually, this new form of poetry spread across Italy. Genoa was the site of Podesta troubadour phenomenon. These were performers who attended across many city-states, be they of the Guelph or the Ghibelline party, that is, pro and anti-pope politics. Rambertino Buvalelli was the initial Podesta troubadour. Sordello was the most famous troubadour who produced parodies on serious topics. His work would influence future writers such as Dante, Robert Browning, Oscar Wilde, and Ezra Pound. The troubadours were linked to the development of poetry in the Kingdom of Sicily. Obbs der Bijuli performed as a, in inverted commas, singer at the coronation of Emperor Frederick II, King of Sicily. Guillaume Augier Novella and Guillaume Figuera were esteemed Occitan poets at Frederick's court. Many French troubadours fled to Italy from France as a result of their criticisms of the Roman Catholic Church. This was an era where criticism of the Pope was a serious act and could incur serious consequences. Here in Italy, protected by the Emperor, who frequently disagreed with the Pope and was excommunicated on numerous occasions, there was Ghibelline politics, whereby this was pro the Emperor and critical of the Pope. This literary form spread in Italy. The Historia di Excidio Troiae by Dares Phrygius was said to be a romantic account of the Trojan War. Guido delle Colonne of Messina was a Sicilian poet who wrote Historia Destructionis Troiae in the style of Phrygius, but instead as a historical work. Italian scholars translated Aristotle and the travels of Marco Polo, linking the classical period to the modern era Renaissance. The language used in this epic, chivalric, romantic poetry was a mixture of Italian and French. Progressively, Italian began to replace French and Occitan languages. In the north of Italy, Giacomino da Verona and Bonvicino da Riva produced religious works in Milanese and Venetian dialects. This was a form of poetry for the people, reflecting the language in the different city-states. It is more than possible that this form of literature was performed in piazzas across the city-states of northern Italy. In 1230, the literature of Sicilian school developed into a more consistent form of language and an early form of Italian. This poetry was much less romantic than French poetry, albeit it would adapt further. An Italian vocabulary was beginning to emerge from the earlier Italian-French hybrid language. Io m'aggiabosto in core, I have stated within my heart, by Giacomo da Lentini, was a key work in this period. Giacomo da Lentini is thought to have invented the sonnet, a form of poetry later perfected by Dante, Petrarch and Shakespeare. Censorship prevented any form of political output. The northern city-states continued to produce new ideas, including Dante's Divine Comedy, an extensive, occasionally critical review of modern political leaders, popes, monarchs, as well as key historical characters. The court of Emperor Frederick and later Manfred still enjoyed the love song, but the new poetic forms were developed by Cielo d'Alcamo. The new form of contrasto, which is discussion, is the expression of feelings and can be very direct. The poems produced by the Sicilian school were the earliest known forms of standard Italian. In later years, Dante would base his style on his study of the Sicilian school of poetry, Rima Siciliana. Poetic styles in northern Italy were still distinct from the Rima Siciliana. The Dominican and Franciscan orders became important in the 13th century. Francis of Assisi was a reformer and a founder of the Franciscan monks, but also a poet. Francis allegedly wrote Cantico del Sole, written in assonance, a poetic form from northern Europe. The authenticity of the work by Francis is still disputed. Jacopone da Todi was a poet and a satirist who mocked the corruption and hypocrisy of the Church under Pope Boniface VIII. The Pope would go on to have many issues with Jacopone and Dante. After the death of his wife, Jacopone joined St. Francis' Third Order. He subjected himself to repeated suffering and wrote religious poems. Jacopone was imprisoned for criticizing Pope Celestine V and Pope Boniface VIII. This was the age of the Guelphs and the Ghibellines, where there was a political tension between the Pope and the Emperor. By the end of the 13th century, the Devozioni del Giovedì e Venerdì Santo combined religious themes and drama.